I want to talk to you guys about a report from the New York Times. Musk said no one has died since aid was cut. That isn't true. That's the title if you want to go read the rest of the piece from the New York Times. And the reason I wanted to read this is because the way that Elon talked about USAID and the way that the discussion around USAID has been comical, and it's talked about like, oh look, it was for this transgender comic book in Guatemala for $20,000 here. It was for shrimps on treadmills here. Just ridiculous nonsense where they're either misconstruing what was the money was spent on, exaggerating, or in many instances just straight up lying. And because of all of this smoke and the speed of how the news has moved on, this was kind of left in the dust. But the thing is, the cuts for USAID were not necessarily immediately felt everywhere. The bodies didn't just start dropping immediately. This is something that takes time and it takes effort. Not time and effort. It takes time to, start to lose the medicine or stop to lose the coverage that USAID used to fill for a lot of these villages when it came to medicine and dire needs. And so, as USAID has lost all of its staff, it can no longer provide the life-saving medicine to millions around the world that it did. And so now the bodies have started to drop. And I wanted to read you a section from this New York Times article about the deaths that are starting to happen. As the world's richest men slash American aid for the world's poorest children, they insist that all is well. No one has died as a result of the brief pause due to a sanity check on foreign aid funding, Elon Musk said. No one. That is not true. In South Sudan, one of the world's poorest countries, the efforts by Musk and President Trump are already leading children to die. Peter Donde was a 10-year-old boy infected with HIV from his mother during childbirth. But American aid kept Peter strong, even as his parents died from AIDS. A program started by President George W. Bush called PEPFAR saved 26 million lives from AIDS, and one was Peter's. Under PEPFAR, an outreach health worker ensured that Peter, the 10-year-old child, and other aid orphans got their medicines. Then in January, Trump and Musk effectively shuttered USAID, perhaps illegally and unconstitutionally. The power of the purse lies with Congress. And that PEPFAR outreach program ended. The orphans were then on their own. Without the help of the community health worker, Peter was unable to get his medicines, so he became sick and died in late February, according to Moses Okni Labani, a health outreach worker who helped manage care for Peter and 144 other vulnerable children. The immediate cause of death was opportunistic pneumonia infection, as Peter's viral load increased and his immunity diminished due to the lack of HIV medicine. Now look, that's one child. But the children I'm telling you about, these aren't just, it's this child and that child. There are many children like this that are dying. I'm just reading you the instances of this one child. Here's another child that was reported in the same piece. Achol Deng, an 8-year-old girl, was also affected with HIV at birth and likewise remained alive because of American assistance. Then in January, she lost her ID card and there was no longer a caseworker to get her a new card and medicines. She became sick and died. Yes, this may eventually save money for the United States taxpayers. How much? The cost of first-line HIV medications to keep a person alive is less than 12 cents a day. I asked Labani if he had ever heard of Musk. He had not. So I explained that Musk is the world's wealthiest man and has said that no one is dying because of USAID cuts. That is wrong, Labani said, sounding surprised that anyone could be so oblivious. He should come to grassroots. Another household kept alive by American aid was that of Jennifer Anya, a 35-year-old single mom and her 5-year-old son, Evan Anzu, both of them HIV positive. Last month, after the aid shutdown, Anya became sick and died, and a week later, Evan died as well, according to David Simon, a community health worker who assisted them. Decisions by billionaires in Washington quickly cost the lives of a mother and her son. They said no one would die. They lied. People are dying. Elon Musk, so he can be cool on social media and so he can make more money as he deregulates the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau and the other institutions that are supposed to hold him accountable to the externalities of his business affecting other people, because he wants that control, because he wants that institutional power, and because he thinks after dipping his toes in politics, he can fix the entirety of the federal bureaucracy with his interns. He has taken a chainsaw to the innards of many different independent institutions created by Congress, which he does not have the authority, let alone to access. He doesn't have the authority to access, let alone chop apart and close down and shutter. He doesn't have the constitutional authority. Article 1 of the Constitution, power of the purse, lies with Congress. They are the ones who can create these institutions. So not only was this a lie, and this got people killed, and saying that, oh, nobody's gonna die, that was nonsense. Who would have thought that if you fired every single aid worker providing medicine, that you wouldn't get the medicine out and the people who needed the medicine would die? That's not hard to think. That's not hard to put together. But they just lied. They lied because they didn't want to say, yes, children with AIDS are going to die, but. Because if they said that, the American people would feel something in their chest that would be disgust, that would be repulsion, that would be anything positive, no. Because of that, you just say no one's going to die. And so when they do die, just deny it and just pretend they never existed. These children never existed to the Trump administration. These children do not matter, and these children never existed. Their lives never mattered. If they did, then you would have at least done it in I mean, come on. If you wanted to close down USAID, why not say, look, we're going to provide this for 3 months and then we're going to cut it off. You have to find other providers in that time, see if you can get other NGOs. They pulled the plug like that. And so when it came to life-saving medicine that people needed to live, that there could not be an interruption for, there's nothing they could do. They didn't have the time to get other providers. And so the children and their parents died. And the richest man in the world, this charitable man who works so hard to save those kids out of that cave, was not willing to spend 12 cents a day of budgets that were not even approved by him, and he doesn't have the congressional authority, the constitutional authority to access or change. He went in there and illegally changed it. He illegally went out of his way, and these children got killed. If you want to help, there is a rapid response fund for trying to fill the gap that was made by the USAID cuts. It's here at flounderspledge.com/fund/rapid-response-fund. If you wanted to donate and you wanted to support the different groups that are providing services to those across South Sudan and other places across the world that were affected by the USAID cuts. They're trying to fill the gaps. They obviously have not been able to fill all of the gaps. It's basically impossible considering how much money has been cut and how quickly and just how suddenly they pulled the plug, but it can fill some of the gap. And again, 12 cents a day is how much it costs to keep them alive. Oh, speaking of USAID, I almost forgot, this is pretty important. A judge said that the dismantling of USAID was unconstitutional, and he has ordered Musk to restore access for the employees. So when I say it's unconstitutional, when I say it's illegal, I'm not like just talking out of my ass. I mean, this was approved by Congress. Clearly says in Article 1 that that's their job. They're the ones who create these institutions. Unelected billionaires can just go in and start chopping it up. And a judge has said that clearly. But he's already done the damage. Children are already dead. And the judges have already said it was illegal. So the damage has been done. The question is, can we restore these services quick enough to stop less kids from dying? Elon Musk's attempt to unilaterally dismantle the U.S. Agency for International Development likely violated the United States Constitution, a federal judge ruled on Tuesday. U.S. District Judge Theodore Chong ordered Musk and his Department of Government Efficiency to immediately give USAID employees access to their email, payment, security notification, and all other electronic systems in order to pause on any efforts to shut down USAID. Judge Chong wrote that must take over usurp the authority of the public's elected representatives in Congress to make decisions on whether, when, and how to eliminate a federal government agency, and of officers of the United States duly appointed under the Constitution to exercise the authority entrusted to them. While Judge Chong rebuked Musk's role within the Trump administration, the exact implications of the decision on the operations of USAID are unclear. Doge and Musk were also ordered to submit a written agreement within 2 weeks that ensures USAID can reoccupy its former headquarters in the Ronald Reagan building in Washington, D.C. The Foreign Aid Agency was among the first government agencies that Doge slashed in its effort to scale back or dismantle much of the federal government. The Trump administration has laid off thousands of employees, revoked funding for more than 80% of its programs, and shed its Washington, D.C. headquarters. And many of the people, by the way, during this cutting and the shedding, it was all done so suddenly. People were literally stranded in other countries and they had to pay for their own flights home as federal employees. We literally abandoned our citizens overseas. Remember all that? We can't abandon our guys over there. Biden abandoned this, Biden abandoned that. Was the cost of like a few $100 ticket. We couldn't do that. We couldn't even leave the staff on hand to get them home before shutting it down. It's like disbanding a military unit when half your boys are deployed in the field. It's ridiculous. Critics of the Trump administration say its efforts to nullify the agency will cripple American influence. Well, duh. Critics. People with brain cells. Also, I want to say that every time that these judges come in and they say, look, it's clear that you have Article 1 authority here. It's to stop the president from doing this, and Congress has authority. This is not right. Every single time this happens, the response that we've largely gotten from Elon and Trump is something along the line of this. The very worst judges, those who repeatedly flout the law, should at least be put to an impeachment vote, whether that vote succeeds or not. Now, to be clear, this has to do with the president using the Alien Enemies Act from 1798 to try to deport Venezuelan, it wasn't Venezuela, I believe it was Guatemalan gang members. But this is the problem. You can only use that in a time of war. That's what we use to create the internment camps for the Japanese. So I already don't like the reuse of this legislation. But if we set the precedent that you don't even need to be at war with the nation that you're fighting to just start deporting its people, you can just declare, this gang is, I guess, occupying America or something, whatever. It concerns me about what other deportations that they could do down the line to people who, with no due process, no trial, nothing, you just grab somebody off the street and deport them using this unconstitutionally. I'm not happy about it. That's for sure. But every single time they get stopped, the question is that, here's how we can make a good case. It's just eliminate the judge. Just eliminate the judge. Just eliminate the judge. Just replace the judge until you get a judge who agrees that they're allowed to break the Constitution in half over their knee. And look, I'm not the only one talking about this. The Chief Justice on the Supreme Court, Roberts, released an unprecedented statement. You don't get statements like this often from Supreme Court justices, especially not the Chief Justice, condemning Donald Trump for his call for the judges reviewing his unconstitutional executive orders, saying no, they are not legal. He's calling for them all to be impeached, and he has stepped out of his nonpartisan role as Chief Justice to say, hey, that's not allowed. This super conservative majority Supreme Court is still turning to the president saying, chill, I'm sorry, we have a democracy. Remember, look, Congress right now is not doing its job. It is not making the president respect its Article 1 authority. It is willingly giving up that power because the Congress is controlled by the Republican Party. And while those congressmen could assert their own authority and strengthen themselves, they appreciate Donald Trump's favor more. So the legislature, which is one of the three sections of government, that one is currently nullified. So the only big check that's really doing the work right now is the judicial system. A judicial system which currently has a conservative supermajority on the Supreme Court. And even that conservative supermajority has its Chief Justice standing up and saying, Donald Trump, you need to follow the law. If the court says this is unconstitutional, you cannot just remove the judges until you have somebody who agrees with you. This is why it's good to have more than one check or balance. Let me read you exactly what he said. This is unprecedented for a Chief Justice to come out and say this. So when people say this is not a constitutional crisis, Chief Justices coming out and saying stuff like this is the type of language you would hear in the eve of a constitutional crisis, or even at the beginning of a constitutional crisis. For more than 2 centuries, it has been established that impeachment is not an appropriate response to disagreement concerning a judicial decision, Roberts said in a statement released by the Supreme Court. The normal appellate review process exists for that purpose. This right here is basically the whole statement. Oh, it was Venezuelan, it wasn't Guatemalan, sorry. This is the whole statement, though. Very short, very simple, to the point, not confusing. You understand what he means clearly, yes? What he is saying is that if you don't like a decision by a judge, you cannot just say, give me new judge. The president has to be held accountable by something. Just because he won one election, not even with a majority of the vote, but just because he won one election doesn't mean he can just reject the rest of the checks and balances of our system that are fundamental to our system that was built in by the founding fathers. Let me read this right here. Let me read you one of the responses to this. Republican members of Congress responding to the president have moved to impeach federal judges who serve lifetime appointments. A Texas Republican, Representative Brandon Gill, said on a social media post Tuesday that he introduced articles of impeachment against Bozoberg. The radical left lunatic of a judge, a troublemaker and agitator who was sadly appointed by Barack Hussein Obama, was not elected president. He didn't win the popular vote by a lot. He didn't win all 7 swing states, Trump posted on Truth Social. This judge, like many other crooked judges I am forced to appear before, should be impeached. He won the election, therefore the law doesn't matter. That's the standard that's being set. I won the election. There doesn't need to be any checks and balances. Why is there a check and balance? I won. The people chose me to do everything all at once, all the time, and it doesn't matter. He doesn't believe that there should be anything barring him, any restriction on him. He does not know how to play the politics game. He does not know how to make the levers of system work. So he is simply trying to take hedge trimmers and cut his own path through the system itself so nothing has to hold him accountable. Or as Steve Bannon put it, shotgun approach. Kick down the door, fire off all at once. It's kind of hard to focus on any one problem. Oh, there's also been a decision by a U.S. judge to block Trump's transgender military ban citing sex discrimination. So that's on hold for the time being. I don't know if that's going to stand, but it's at least on hold for the time being. Did you guys hear the story about this French scientist? This thing baffled me.